Forget the flickering laboratory and the bolts of lightning. Forget the creature with stitched-together skin and a shambling gait. The true story of Frankenstein begins not with a work of fiction, but in a real German castle with a real man. His name was Johann Conrad Dippel, a brilliant alchemist who saw death not as an end, but as a problem to be solved with a boiling pot and a scalpel. He didn't create a monster of flesh and bone. His work was more intimate, more elemental. He sought to render down the very essence of life, blood, bones, flesh, into a thick, black, foul-smelling concoction he called his elixir of life. This is not a ghost story, it is the true tale of the man who haunted Castle Frankenstein, a genius who, in his unholy quest to become a god, became the inspiration for the most famous monster in history. The historical figure. To understand the man, you must first understand the shadow he was born under. In 1673, in the dark, imposing fortress of Castle Frankenstein near Darmstadt, Germany, Johann Conrad Dippel came into the world. This was not a place of fairy tales. The castle was a grim stone sentinel that had watched over the Rhine Valley for centuries, a place of Teutonic knights, feudal lords, and whispered legends. The 30 Years' War had ended only a few decades earlier, leaving Germany a scarred landscape of famine, plague, and lingering trauma. It was a world where God and the devil felt terrifyingly real, where superstition and science were locked in a moral struggle. This was the world that shaped Dippel. He was brilliant. That much was clear from the start. He possessed a restless, towering intellect that consumed knowledge voraciously. He enrolled at the University of Gießen, where he studied not just one subject, but all of them: theology, philosophy, and alchemy. He was a product of the late Renaissance, a time when it was still believed that one man could master the sum of all human knowledge. But with his brilliance came a dangerous, almost pathological arrogance. Dippel was a contrarian by nature, a man who seemed to take a perverse pleasure in demolishing the cherished beliefs of others. His first target was the church. While studying theology, he became disgusted with the mainstream Lutheranism of his day. He saw the established churches as corrupt, worldly institutions that had lost their connection to true spirituality. He became a radical pietist, arguing for a deeply personal, almost mystical form of Christianity free from the dogma and hierarchy of the clergy. He published scathing pamphlets accusing church leaders of hypocrisy and heresy. His writing was sharp, witty, and utterly merciless. He famously declared, "I will not be a part of any particular church or heresy, but will be my own church and my own heresy." This was not the statement of a humble servant of God, it was the declaration of a man who believed his own intellect was superior to centuries of established doctrine. He was quickly branded a heretic. He was forced to flee Gießen, beginning a pattern that would define his entire life. He would arrive in a new city, dazzle the locals with his brilliance, gather a following, and then inevitably alienate the authorities with his radical ideas and unbearable arrogance, forcing him to escape in the dead of night. He was becoming a permanent outsider, a man at war with every institution he encountered. The elixir of life. Having declared war on theology, Dippel turned his ferocious intellect to the other great mysteries, the nature of matter and the secret of life itself. He fully embraced the world of alchemy. It's important to remember that in the 17th and 18th centuries, alchemy was not seen as a pseudoscience. It was the cutting edge of chemistry and medicine, practiced by geniuses like Isaac Newton. Alchemists believed that the universe held a divine secret, that all matter was fundamentally one, and that with the right knowledge, base metals could be transmuted into gold, diseases could be cured, and human life could be extended indefinitely. Dippel set up laboratories in cities across Europe, from Berlin to Amsterdam to Copenhagen. His goal was the ultimate prize of alchemy, the creation of the elixir of life. He sought a universal medicine, a single substance that could perfect the human body and grant a form of immortality. And to create it, he turned to the most taboo materials imaginable. This is where the historical facts begin to curdle into Gothic horror. Dippel's most famous invention was his oleum dippeli, or Dippel's animal oil. This was a real substance, a thick, black, tar-like oil with an unbelievably foul odor. For decades, it was a legitimate, albeit controversial, medicine used as an antispasmodic and anticonvulsant. But it was the recipe that horrified people. Dippel created his oil through the destructive distillation of animal parts. He would take horns, hooves, leather, blood, and bones, seal them in a retort, and heat them without oxygen until they broke down into their constituent parts, yielding his black oil. Imagine the scene: a dark, cluttered laboratory. The air is thick with smoke and the stomach-turning stench of boiling blood and burning bone. Dippel, his face lit by the hellish glow of his furnaces, tends to his alchemical contraptions, a priest of a dark new science, seeking the essence of life by rendering dead things down to their foulest components. This is historical fact. But around these facts, legends began to grow, whispered by the townspeople who lived near his labs. They saw the strange lights flickering in his windows at all hours. They smelled the unholy odor wafting from his chimneys. And they heard the rumors. The rumors said that Dippel was not content with animal corpses. They said he had turned to the local graveyards, that he was a lichenfletter, a corpse robber. The legends claimed that Dippel believed the human soul was a physical substance that could be transferred from one body to another. To test this, he needed fresh cadavers. The stories told of him sneaking into graveyards under the cover of darkness, digging up the recently deceased and hauling them back to his laboratory. There, in the bowels of the castle or his rented rooms, he would perform his gruesome experiments. He boiled the corpses in giant vats, hoping to distill the soul itself. He used funnels and hoses, attempting to transfer the soul of one corpse into another. Did he actually do these things? There is no definitive proof. Dippel never wrote about human experimentation in his surviving texts, but the stories were persistent, and they attached to him like a shroud. The line between the brilliant, if eccentric, chemist and the monstrous ghoul began to dissolve. The fear he inspired was so palpable that it became its own reality. When you have a man of terrifying intelligence, born in a place called Castle Frankenstein, who openly defies God and admits to boiling down dead things to create potions, it is only a small leap of the imagination to picture him hunched over a human corpse, a mad glint in his eye, trying to unlock the secret of life itself. The ambiguous man. Dippel's ambition was not limited to medicine. He believed his alchemical work could create gold. On several occasions, he convinced wealthy patrons, including nobles and even kings, to fund his experiments in transmutation. He would perform elaborate demonstrations, claiming to have turned lead into gold, often using sleight of hand and chemical tricks to produce a small amount of the precious metal. These successes would win him temporary fame and fortune, but they never lasted. His arrogance, his heretical religious views, or the simple failure to produce gold in the quantities he promised always led to his downfall. He was exiled from Berlin. He was imprisoned for 7 years in Denmark for his controversial religious writings and his alchemical schemes. He wandered through Germany, Sweden, and Holland, a brilliant, charismatic, and dangerous nomad. He was, in essence, a man who wanted to be God. He sought to rewrite theology with his own doctrines, to conquer disease and death with his own elixir, and to create wealth from nothing with his own alchemical knowledge. He rejected every form of established authority, religious, political, and scientific, believing only in the power of his own singular genius. This is the true heart of the Frankenstein story, the brilliant but arrogant creator who, in his pursuit of divine power, unleashes something dark and monstrous upon the world. For Dippel, the monster was not a creature of stitched flesh, it was the chaos and ruin that his own ambition left behind. Dippel died in 1734, likely from a stroke, though his enemies whispered that he had finally poisoned himself with his own concoctions. He died as he had lived, in controversy and on the move. But his legend was just beginning. In the region around Castle Frankenstein, the stories of the strange alchemist who was born there continued to grow. He became a local boogeyman, a cautionary tale told to frighten children. The stories of his grave robbing and his ghoulish experiments became part of the local folklore. The legacy of a monster. Fast forward 80 years to the summer of 1816. A group of young English writers are vacationing in Switzerland, trapped indoors by incessant rain. To pass the time, they challenge each other to write a ghost story. One of them is an 18-year-old girl named Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, soon to be Mary Shelley. 2 years prior, Mary had traveled down the Rhine River, a journey that would have taken her right past the looming shadow of Castle Frankenstein. It is almost certain that she, a curious and well-read young woman, would have heard the local legends about the castle's most infamous son, the brilliant, God-defying alchemist, Johann Conrad Dippel. The seed was planted. The story of a real German scientist obsessed with creating life from dead matter merged in her young imagination with the latest scientific discoveries of her own era. Specifically, the experiments of Luigi Galvani, who had shown that electricity could make the limbs of a dead frog twitch. The result was Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, published in 1818. Mary Shelley never mentioned Dippel by name, but the parallels are too strong to be coincidental. She took the historical figure and transformed him into a literary archetype. She took the real Castle Frankenstein and made it the setting for a Gothic nightmare. The real doctor's ambition to create an elixir of life from boiled corpses became the fictional doctor's ambition to create a living being from stitched-together corpses. The real man's rejection of God in favor of his own genius became the central theme of her novel, a warning against the dangers of scientific hubris. Mary Shelley created a myth that has overshadowed the man who inspired it. But the truth is, Dippel's story is in some ways more unsettling than the fiction. Victor Frankenstein is clearly a villain, a man whose ambition leads to tragedy. Dippel is a more ambiguous figure. He was a healer whose medicine was used for decades. He was a religious visionary whose ideas, while heretical, were born from a genuine spiritual quest. He was a scientific pioneer whose work in chemistry, however gruesome, was a legitimate part of the scientific inquiry of his time. He was not a simple monster. He was a man, brilliant and flawed, who flew too close to the sun. His desire to understand and conquer the fundamental forces of life and death is not an alien one. It is the same desire that drives our own modern science. The ultimate horror of Dippel's story is not that he was a monster, but that he was so profoundly human. His sin was not evil, but arrogance. He believed that knowledge was the ultimate good and that any method was justified in its pursuit. He could not see the moral line between distilling animal bones and potentially desecrating human graves, because both were simply steps towards the same glorious goal, unlocking the secrets of God. Today, we stand in Dippel's laboratory. We have moved far beyond boiling bones in a pot. We now manipulate the very code of life itself. We practice genetic engineering. We're on the verge of creating artificial intelligence. We pursue radical life extension with a fervor that would have made Dippel proud. We tell ourselves that our motives are pure, to cure disease, to end suffering, to better the human condition. And they are. But so, in his own mind, we're Dippel's. We have come to the end of this unsettling journey, and I hope it has given you a new perspective on the Frankenstein myth, a perspective not of fiction, but of the historical figure who inspired it. The story of Johann Conrad Dippel is a powerful reminder that the line between a brilliant scientist and a mad one is often a matter of perspective, and that the pursuit of knowledge without wisdom can lead to monstrosity. What aspect of Dippel's real-life story struck you the most? The boiling of animal parts, the rumors of grave robbing, or the profound humanity of his ambition? Share your thoughts below and continue this important conversation. If you believe in unflinching historical exploration like this, please hit that like button, share this video, and join our community by subscribing and ringing the notification bell. Your support allows us to keep telling these difficult but necessary stories. Thank you for listening.